And I think we're live. Hello everybody, and welcome to, I guess it's our final week of our mystery sew along. I am absolutely, does anybody hear me?
Yeah, start with that.
I forgot to ask to make sure somebody says hi and or give us a thumbs up or something just so we know that this thing is working. I'm just so excited to get going.
Hello, Rita from Ottawa.
Oh, perfect. Good. Yay! So anyways, I am absolutely loving all the pictures people are posting as their quilts are coming together, and I hope to see the rest of them soon. It's amazing how different things look with all the different colors of fabric. And it's really great for us to see and hear how much you liked the project and whether we want to do another one next year. So this week what we're going to be doing is, first off, we're going to be sewing our borders together and then putting them on the quilt. One thing that I like to do is I like to sew my borders together all in one piece. I do that for a couple reasons. I feel sometimes it's more frugal with the fabric. I can almost save a full strip of fabric sometimes, as opposed to sewing like a strip and a half and then throwing a piece away, and that I'll have one long strip left at the end. So we've got our pieces cut out according to what our instructions said, and I'm going to tell you what rule of thumb is, and then I'm going to tell you why I do things differently. Sometimes.
Hello, Valerie, and hello, Janet. They said we're live and clear.
Oh, good. Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start with my 2.5-inch strips for our first border, because of course we have to put our first border on before we do the second border. So normally, rule of thumb or old school used to be that you want to sew your borders together on a diagonal. So that would mean
Not just old school, still rule of thumb.
Well, still rule of thumb. So you will be sewing them, and we'll go over this in a second, but I just wanted to show you, once you're finished, you have a diagonal seam. They say that sometimes that's less noticeable. Yes and no. My rule of thumb, if it's a 2.5-inch border or smaller border, I will sew it on the diagonal. But when it's a really big border, 4.5 and up, when I sew them on the diagonal and cut this excess off, it's a lot of fabric that I'm wasting, and I particularly don't like doing that, so I sew my larger borders on a straight.
It's actually kind of like, if it's a 4-inch border, you're losing 4 inches of fabric to do
on
that
each
angle.
strip, on
And
each side.
if you're needing almost exactly the amount of strips you can have that you have cut, it's almost not nice to cut another strip just to have it on the diagonal.
Absolutely. And the other thing is a fabric like this. You can see that it's a striped fabric. If I would be putting this on a diagonal, let me find another end here. I'm just going to fold this so you can get a visual. Because it's almost like a stripe,
Your hand is in the way.
it's going to show up a lot more than if it's straight sewn.
That example, that doesn't show up at all.
It doesn't show up at all. So I sewed them straight because I feel when I'm using a stripe, it's going to show up less if I sew it straight. But I do want to show you how to sew on a diagonal. So I have these fabrics here because there's a couple little tricks to do it. This is for a different quilt, and they're regular fabric. So I wanted to show you with regular fabric as well as opposed to batik, because batik you really can't tell what side is which. This one I know there's a definite right side and wrong side. Okay, so when I'm sewing things together on a diagonal, I like using the lines of my mat to line up. Fabric has a salvage on both ends, And you can see that one selvage will have, I call it the writing selvage, and the other selvage usually doesn't have writing on it. That being said, it's still a selvage and it has to be cut off. So I have trained my brain to do this, and I do this with every border that I sew together, whether I'm sewing backing together or binding together. I always use this method, and then if there is a direction in the fabric, I really don't have to worry about it. And what do I mean by direction? If it has like butterflies or flowers or something that's supposed to be upright, you know, in the same direction, if you sew it together in this method, you'll never have them mixed up. And all you're going to do is you are going to sew your two strips together using the selvage, the white selvage side to the not selvage side. And then once we sew them together, they will always be in the same direction and you'll never get a strip upside down.
Sometimes the selvages will both be white, but one will have the writing on it and one won't have the writing on it. So it'll still be the writing selvage to the not writing selvage.
Okay. So so here we go. So I'm going to line up my top first strip on the lines. Also, I can't cut my selvages off because then I won't know what end is the selvage side, what end is the not selvage side. So I always leave those on. That being said, I have to make sure at the end of the day that they're all cut off. Selvages shrink differently than other fabrics. So we do want to make sure that we never leave them attached to our strips, that we cut them off. So I am going to line one up on an upright strip, and I'm going to take the other one and put it at a 90 degree, and I'm using the other lines of my mat. And that's keeping it nice and straight. I am lining it up so my selvage, I can see it from this side. If you look on the other side, you can't see it, but you can see that there's the white line there. Does it show up? Mm-hmm. Okay. So now what I want to do is we're going to do it two different ways. We're going to sew it together two different ways. First, old school, I will draw a line.
This strip is at a diagonal.
Oh, it is. Lining those up perfectly. And then I will draw a line from corner to corner.
From where the
two strips intersect. I should have had a friction marker here. This is not showing too much. I think they can see it now. Can they see that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So, thank goodness I sew better than I draw lines, because now I have to analyze the line, and I want to make sure that it's going right into that intersection of the two strips. And then I'm going to sew one thread to the right side of that line. So I've got a couple pins, and I'm going to pin them here, and then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this. Now I could use any foot to sew this with. I just so happen to have my 1/4 inch foot on here, so that works really well. I am going to put it in the needle down position so I can butt my needle right up into where that intersection is. So right there, I'm going to put my needle.
So you're not actually using your 1/4 inch foot as a 1/4 inch seam though?
Exactly. At this method, I'm not. I'm just using it to sew. I have that slot in my foot, and I'm going to line that up to say it's one thread to the right of my line. Because I have the diagonal seam tape there, I can also line this line up with the red line, and it'll help me keep straight. Again, I've got it on my 2.0 stitch length, and we are going to sew. Now, if we drew our line a little crooked, you would have to analyze where your line is, because the goal of the day is, and again, before I cut this corner off, I'm going to fold it up and make sure that it lines up. So you can see here that I'm not lined up quite perfectly on the corner. That's because when I started sewing, I should have started sewing an extra thread to the right. So I'm going to have to undo that, undo this, and do this over again. That's why this is my least preferred method. Do you remember the folded corner ruler that we've used? I think we've used it quite a few times in making the quilt. I love it for binding because that simple fact that I can literally sew better than I can draw. And a lot of it has to do with where you're drawing the line, whether the lines don't line up or not. So I am going to use, I'm just using the mini today because it's just smaller. If you have the bigger one, it works exactly the same way. So I'm going to take my strips.
Don't lie. You're using the mini because you can't find your big one.
Shh. It's disappeared again. You had to tell. Oh, man. Anyways, so there's the salvage, the writing salvage, or I call it the salvage to the not salvage. To this end, I'm going to place them right sides together. Again, I'm going to take that solid line, the same as we did before, goes on the side of my strip with the flat part on the top. And then I know everything is straight because this line continues down. My 2.5 inch line continues down on the side of the strip. My 2.5 inch line lines up with the bottom strip. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut, and I'm also going to take a second and cut that little dog ear off on that side. I can cut this dog ear off now. I can cut it off after. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to leave it there for now. And now we're going to go and sew. So now this time I do need my 1/4 inch foot because now I'm going to sew with that perfect 1/4 inch seam. So then I'm just going to sew this along. And I'm going to not take it out of the sewing machine for a minute because I like to just keep chain piecing these. So this strip that's on the top, if I take that and turn it right side up beside my sewing machine, again, remember there's that white salvage. I can take my black salvage or my not salvage, line them up, lining it up on the top. All my lines are lined up. Cut this one. This one, if you want to take that off, you can just eyeball that, cut it off a little bit. Whoops, I moved it. And then we'll sew that one. And heads up, this is exactly what we do for binding as well. So if I'm sewing all 11 strips that I need to do my quilt together, I will just continue on adding one strip after the other. So I'm just going to stop right now because I want to show you, hopefully, I want to show you that this seam is better than my first one. So when I open it up, and I'm going to press that with the iron. I'm just pressing it to the side. I'm not pressing it open. If it's binding, I press it open. That's going to be another whole talk. So there. So now you can see that my edges are lined up way better than what they did on this first one. So now that I know it's perfect, I already have it cut off. If this one's not quite perfect, I'm going to unsew, fix that end, then I can cut it off at the 1/4 inch. So now we're ready. now that we have all our borders together, we're going to go put them to the quilt. If there's any questions while we get adjusted, please let us know. And if you get seasick, look away from the computer right now, because Tiff's going to move the camera to the other side of the table.
Jeez.
See?
I knew I was going to drop it. I told you my goal was to not drop it, and I failed. Turn the mic. Carefully. Don't touch the mic.
I have to turn it up because I'm standing now.
I see you.
Okay, so the way you put borders on a quilt are really, really, really important. A lot of times we get to this stage and we figure, oh, I'm done. I just want to grab the borders and I want to slap them on and sew them. You can really ruin a really beautiful quilt like that. I've had a couple quilts in trying to put them on the long arm. The borders weren't put on properly and they're very wavy. You can't get them to lay flat, and you end up having to take tucks and pleats in them just to get them to lay flat, that we can actually put them on a long arm. Yeah, I've seen some really beautiful quilts just ruined because the borders aren't put on properly. So I'm going to tell you 2 ways to put on properly. First off, it's the way you're supposed to do it. So what you want to do is figure out how long you have to cut your borders. So first, normally rule of thumb, we're going to do the side borders first, and then we're going to sew those on, remeasure for the top and bottom, because the top and bottom goes through the other borders. So what I want to do, and also why you don't just sew them on, the edge has a lot of seams in it and it has a lot of stretch and it's not stabilized. So if I just started sewing or measuring, sewing all the way down, I could end up having a lot more fabric in my border than what it should be. I'll have to
By stretching the quilt.
Yeah, as a great example, my sister Carol, she was just doing a I think it was like about a 45-inch table runner, and she says, oh, I don't have to listen to her, I can just do it this. So she just put the border on, sewed it on, and then hacked it off on the bottom so it was the right length. She went and put it on the table to quilt it. She goes, Cindy, it's not laying flat. Look at the edge is ruffled. I unsewed the border on the long side, so like 42, 45 inches. It was 1.5 inches longer than what it should have been. So instead of being 42, it was about 43 and a half inches long. When you think about it, when you have a quilt and you multiply that by 2 or 3, that first border now is 3 inches too long. So it's not going to lay flat. It's all going to be ruffly. Put another border on, it's going to accentuate that. Put another border on, it's going to accentuate that. So I have seen actually having to take a good inch tuck in a border just to try to get it laid flat. So this is the way you're supposed to do it. So we never want to measure the edge of our quilt. And also the reason, because we're our very own enemies, because how many times do we go, look at our quilt, and every time we do that we stretch the edges because there's no stabilization there. So when I go to measure for my borders, I want to measure about 6 inches up, and I'm going to measure in 3 places: 6 inches up from the bottom, 6 inches up from the top, and 6 inches across the middle. Usually there's a little bit of variance in the measurements.
6 inches across the middle.
Or straight across the middle. Yes. So I'm going to go about 6 inches up. And I like to take a seam, find a seam, because a seam is the most stable part of the quilt. So I'm going to go that far, and I'm going to measure, making sure, again, I pressed my quilt and I steamed it so it's all laying nice and flat. So instead of being, whoops, I moved my tape. I'm at 58 3/8. So my quilt should be 58.5 inches long if everything worked fine. Yet I'm measuring 58 3/8. Then I'm going to measure through the center. And I'm at 58 1/4. And then I am going to measure on this side. And some of that is because of the pressing as well. I'm back to 58 3/8. So what I want to do is I want to take those three measurements, add them together, and divide by 3 to get an average, and that's what I cut my border. And here's where most people, their eyes start glazing over and saying, you have to make me do math. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put them on. Well, don't do that. Do it this second way. I call it my no math measurement. We won't need a measuring tape, but it will work really well. So I'm going to go into where my middle of my quilt is, about where the middle is, where I've got a nice seam all the way along, and this is where I'm going to cut my borders using that measurement. So what I want to do is I want to find the edge of my border. I'm going to lay it on my quilt, and we're just going to make sure that everything is...
And you're going to trim the selvage off the first edge?
Absolutely. I've got it over a little bit. So I want to make sure that it's lying on a seam. And if you don't have the luxury of having a large table, all you're going to do is pin it in a few spots. So now I could move it to have the rest of it flat. So I am going to pin this side, and now I have a little mat. I'm going to go to the end over here, and I'm going to trim this flush with my quilt. I'm going to go to the second side. That's the joys of having a long table.
You can also do this on the floor.
We can also do it on the floor, or like I said, we can just move it and use our regular cutting table. This pin in here is going to make my ruler wonky, so I'm just going to take that one out, make sure it's nice and flat, and I am going to cut this piece off. So what's that measurement I cut to? I really don't know, but I really don't care. I know some people are rolling their eyes and saying you're not doing it the right way, but if you can't do the math, at least do this, because it is going to let you have nice borders that fit nice and flat. So this side off again. And just going to double check this border. This one doesn't have to be trimmed because that was a first...
Why did that pull?
Oh, it's just folded up. Yeah, so this one doesn't have to be trimmed. I lined it up right because I had a nice square cut. I lined it up with the edge of my quilt, and it fit just fine. So now that we have our borders may not be exactly the size of the edge. Remember that my middle border measured, it was like 1/8 of an inch or so off. One thing that I want to tell you, if you measure your quilt, and if you measure like the two sides and then measure through the middle, and you have a difference of more than 1/4 inch, like 1/2 inch, an inch, something's wrong. So maybe go back and fix what's wrong at that point, as opposed to like being out 1/8 or a 1/16 or 1/8 and stuff like that. That's just normal. But if it's a big amount, go see what ended up happening.
With a large quilt, even sometimes out 1/4 inch.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I know that one lady had a pieced border and it wouldn't lay flat to her, and we started counting. She had an extra block on one side.
Oh, wow.
But because she stretched it in and put the border in, it fit, but it wouldn't lay straight. Okay, so we have our two borders, and now I want to sew them on the end of the quilt. So again, if I just start sewing here, going to my machine and sewing, you know how fabric slides in a sewing machine? Your two ends are not going to line up. So I want to pin my border onto my quilt, and if there's any difference in the lengths, I want to even that out along the quilt. Distribute it. Thank you. That was the word that I was trying to remember. So I'm going to take my border and I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm going to place a pin in the fold. You can also use an iron and iron a crease in it, but sometimes I can't find the crease after, so I do it this way. And then I'm also going to fold it one more time so I can find the quarters. So if you ever heard anybody talking about quartering the borders, this is what they're talking about. So I have my fold here, and I'm just putting my pin in to find the two folds. Now I can open it up, and I'm going to put my pin in the folds on those spots just for the marking. So I'm going to do that on both of my borders, and I'm also going to do the very same thing on my quilt. So I'm going to fold it in half, and of course, if we are perfect, because we have a block that's right in the center of our quilt, we know that that is the center of the quilt. And I'm also going to fold it one more time. Oh, here's something I thought of. If for some reason you had a block that it's in the center that's an actual seam, we'll just pretend it's this seam here. Make sure when you're measuring it, when you fold it into the quarters, that you're not using the edge of your fabric, that you're actually lining up the seam on the edge.
Not the seam allowance.
Not the seam allowance. So, folding that one. And we're going to go here. And now I'm going to just stick that pin in those two folds. Open this up. And because of the salvages and stuff, it's not exactly in the center. Or because the salvage, the sashing. Sashing. Alrighty. So now I have my borders that I marked the pins. I want to put these right side together, and I'm just going to first off line up the pins. So my center pin, lining it up with that pin, I'm going to take one out and pin it in place. My next one.
Personally, I like to pin it in place before taking the other pins out.
Pin it in place.
Because I have a habit of talking or doing other stuff while I'm quilting, and then all of a sudden I've taken the pins out and I haven't pinned it in place and I don't know what I'm doing.
Now I'm also going to line up the edges absolutely perfect, and I am going to pin those.
Oh, Rita, I see that you're saying something, but it's not showing me your comments. Not sure what's going on there.
So now that I have them marked in those positions, I want to add a couple more pins, and you can add as many pins as you want. In between these two pins, I'm just going to give it a little tug, little stretch, so it's all lined up perfectly, and I am going to put another pin. When you go to sew your borders on your quilt, this is a place, and I'm going to talk about it more when I'm actually sewing the border on the quilt. But this is a place where some people, especially new quilters, have a tendency to let their border slide. So what's really great to use is the pins in a bottle.
Whoop, sorry.
So I am pinning every, whatever this is, 8 inches kind of thing. If you were using the pins in a bottle, you can go in here and you can pin every inch or two along the way. And that will make it really great. We don't have the iron on today, so I don't know if that's going to stay. But it will keep it from shifting when you're going to sew it. They're long areas, so they have a tendency to shift more than when you're doing piecing. Okay, so let's go back now that we have our border on. I could also sew the other, or pin the other border on right now. I'm just going to work with this one, and let's go over to the sewing machine.
Not to drop it.
Trying not to drop it. Over this time, I have to squeeze it a bit. I am, got it.
I'm getting there.
I'm just going to fix my sewing machine right now. This sewing machine, when I put it in the needle down position, my foot comes up a little bit. I want to just take that function off. So I'm just going to go into the settings, and it's my automatic presser foot. I am just going to turn that off. So now when I sew and my needle stops in the down position, my foot's down. And I do that for two reasons. And I will show you. So I'm just going to start lining them up. I'm going to sew up to that pin, and now I can remove that pin. So two reasons. If I had my foot up right now, like that, and I'm adjusting all this layers and all this quilt, I could be really tugging on my needle because that's the only thing that's holding the quilt, and I can get some needle defection and a pretty poor seam. So I want to make sure that my foot and my needle is holding it nice and tight, so now when I move it, it's going to the foot's going to give it help, not just the needle to hold it in place. So now that I sewed to that pin, I want to sew to this pin. Everything can shift under here. I'm going to just turn it over. See how big of a gap it is just by accident? Is there a question?
No, sorry, Rita was saying that this is the way she learned to do her borders, which is great.
Perfect. Perfect. Alrighty, so I want to make sure that that piece of fabric in between my two pins is lined up absolutely perfect. The only part that I know is perfect is now in between the foot and my thumb, so that's all I'm going to sew. Once I sew to my thumb, I'm going to stop. I'm going to readjust everything, make sure everything's lined up to the pin. I'm just making sure it's lined up just a little past the pin. So now I can sew to the pin. Sewing right up to it, and now I'm on to the next section. If I'm sewing along, let me see if I can get it to do it. I'll just adjust this. Okay, so if I'm sewing along and I'm starting to get a little pucker, that my fabric on the top has shifted, I don't want to just pull my pin out and move that pucker, because by the time you get to the end, it's just going to accentuate it, and you're going to have like an inch left of your border strip that should be into the quilt. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that any of that fullness stays on the top of that pin. So I can use a purple thing, and I can just keep adding it in. I've got a lump here. I'll make sure my seam's going in the right direction. And make sure everything stays on the side of the pin that it's supposed to, sewing up to the pin, and now I can move that pin. If for some reason I have a little bit extra fabric on the bottom, that's great, because if you ever, well,
as opposed to the top.
As opposed to the top. Because have you ever heard of the saying baggy bottoms? The baggy fabric, the fabric that has a little bit more fabric to it, you want to put that on the bottom. The feed dogs will help it fold into the machine. So what I will do also to help it is, you know how an outside curve is bigger than an inside curve? I can grab in between my pins, give it a little turn like this, Make sure that's lined up. And I can make sure all that bulk is staying in between the two pins. I can also give it a little bit of tug so it'll stretch the top one a little bit to fit with what's on the quilt. And on to the next one. I have to make sure that it's lined up in between. This time I'm only going to sew to that seam. Because it wants to move on me. Scratching with my nails, I can move the top fabric into place. Now I'm holding it, aligning everything up. Sewing up to my pin, everything's nice and straight, nice and flat. Any fullness is being eased in between the pins. Curve here. I'm also feeling underneath or peeking when I feel a seam to make sure my seam allowances are going in the direction that we press them. Sewing machines, they always want to catch on our sewing machine, so we try not to do that. The FOF machines, they have the IDT, the built-in walking foot. That really helps the layers stay together. If you can set up your regular walking foot, if your regular machine has a walking foot, if you can sew and figure out where your 1/4 inch is for that, they're great. Because of the long pieces of fabric, then they won't shift as much. I'm just going to get rid of that thread there. Lining up. Again, I only know that it's as far as my thumb, so I don't want to pull my hand away and keep sewing because I don't know if it's lined up in there. Sewing right up to my pin. And our last section here. So you can see how the glue, if you would have had the glue in the iron, it would have kept everything really nicely lined up, so you wouldn't have to worry about adjusting all the time. You could have done that on the flat surface. So it makes it a little bit easier. I'm getting to the bottom here. Now, because of all the weight and everything, it's going to want to push the quilt sideways. So I want to make sure that I'm going to hold that. And my hand, my left hand is along the left side of my foot. I can take my purple thing and make sure that it goes right through like that. So now that I have this border on here, I am going to press it, and I'm going to press it towards the border that I just put on. Especially being this one is a pieced border, it's going to want to go that way anyways. I am going to sew the other border to this side, the opposite side. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to cut my second borders, measuring from the outside of this border to the outside of that border. And that's the way you should put on borders for everything that you do. We did it for the first border. We're going to just repeat the whole process for our second border or our third border if we're doing the king size. Again, first the sides, sew them on, then cut the top and the bottom. Again, pin matching those 1/4 marks, sewing them on, and then we're good to go.
And then in our next border, same thing.
And then the next border, the same thing. I have a quilt that's on my bed right now that's one of my favorite quilts. It has 12-inch blocks in the center, and then it has 9 borders. And every single border I had to do that way. And it's working out really, it works out really well, especially if you have one of them that's a pieced border in there. things just fit so much nicer.
Is there any questions?
If there is any questions, one other thing that I wanted to touch on right now is what we are doing is just a square corner. So once this one is on, let me find a corner here. Once I sew this one on here, we're going to have the straight border on this side and the straight border here. Some people like to do a mitered border, and that's a diagonal seam along the center. This one might have been fun because it was a stripe to do it that way. That's a whole different process of putting the borders on. On my YouTube channel, I have a wonderful method that's unique, that's not like anybody else's.
Well, you were taught it by someone.
I was taught.
So
there was, yes.
There's other people
Oh,
out there that
absolutely.
do it.
It was, I had never seen it before.
Yeah.
And it was Charlotte Ure from Sudbury. I know you Sudbury people will probably recognize the name. And she taught me how to do the mitered border. Never found it on the internet, never found it anywhere. So that's why I put the video up. It's the best way to do a mitered corner in a border without getting rabbit ears or things that are folded. They just work so much better. So if you do, so a mitered border would be one border that goes this way and the other border, I can give you a visual here if I can figure out how to do it. Will look like that. So it is a diagonal seam that goes through from the corner of your quilt to the corner of your binding or border. So if you want to do that, I'm not going to touch other than telling you about it. It is on my YouTube channel. So if you ever have to do a mitered border, check that out. I had to laugh because Tiffany helped me videotape it. She had never did a mitered border. Helped me videotape it, edited it. And then the next quilt that she went to sit down had mitered borders. And she said to me, she goes, so what's the big deal about mitered borders? This wasn't hard at all. I'm all, that's because you didn't do it the old way. So check that out if that's what you want to do.
Valerie said, excellent video for mitered borders. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you, Val. Yes. So anyways, I'm going to continue on. So I am now going to put the border on my other side. Then I'm going to again cut, put them on the top and bottom, continue on. So ladies, people, please show me your quilts. Remember, I have to live vicariously through you. I want to know if you liked this video. Please comment on that. Show us the pictures of your quilt. Tell me if you want to do another mystery next year.
And I hope you enjoyed it.
I really hope that you enjoyed it. We had lots of fun doing this. It has been a little stressful at times, wondering, being a mystery, my first mystery, I didn't know, if everybody would like the quilt. We thought we liked it. So, yeah. So let me know, please, whether it's on the Facebook page or comment on the video here. We'll check those after. So let's go put the borders on our quilts. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And happy quilting, everybody. Bye now.